Our first presentation this afternoon is on powerful planning, a framework for delivering audience-driven integrated digital communications. And Florian Engel, co-founder and managing director of More Onion, is going to share More Onion's strategy and planning model used across dozens of successful digital campaigning and fundraising projects. So over to you, Florian.
Hello, and thank you. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Florian Engel, and I'm the co-founder and managing director of the digital mobilization agency More Onion. After more than a decade of supporting organizations with campaigning, fundraising, and digital communications, we've learned a lot about the challenges and opportunities in organizations of different sizes. For an example, does your organization often have objectives like this, like recruit 150,000 new supporters in 2024? This is something that we've sadly seen a lot. What happens next is that a lot of budget gets spent on advertising, and the organization might succeed in recruiting a lot of supporters. But will it really help the organization also translate that into impact? On its own, that's often not the case. What might happen next is that these often expensively recruited supporters get conflicting calls to action. So for an example, there might be one email that goes out to the list asking supporters to sign a petition on one particular issue, and then a donation ask on a completely unrelated organization, like a completely unrelated project or topic. In most cases, organizations actually realize that this is happening and that it's an issue, but it's very challenging to fix. So an organization might come up with a plan, but because the resources within the organization are not managed by a single department, the conversation often goes like this. Could you help prepare with this call to action in time? The other department responds by saying, sorry, we've got other plans. We actually need 4 months notice because that's how we do planning. So obviously this is not the fault of like anyone in particular. It's just how organizations are set up to operate. From our perspective, it's really difficult to set objectives that measure the things that truly matter to the organization. So not just any objectives really, but objectives that think of the entire organization as one, and then integrate the objectives from different departments to work really well together. The result is often objectives like recruiting 150,000 new supporters, but not really having a clear plan on how to do like long-term development of those relationships. So planning supporter-centered communications across departments can be challenging. A part of that is definitely due to capacity planning, but it's also due to like a lack of transparency and a lack of prioritization from one department to another. All this makes it really difficult to shape the work that you do to produce communications that actually meets the audience where they're at, and at the same time helps you achieve organizational objectives. We thought, how can we actually develop a framework that helps organizations sort of find the sweet spot between the audience needs on the one side and the organizational objectives on the other side? But also I just really wanted to include a Venn diagram. So here you go. Over the years, we've developed our own framework to help address these challenges. And this is the first time that we're actually sharing it with a wider audience. But we've used this same framework and we've gradually tweaked it, and it's proven to be like really useful for a lot of different projects that we've been working at. Of course, we are digital mobilization specialists, but so the model and all the examples that we're using here very much sort of uses terminology from this area, but it also sort of shows our point of view. But we think it's actually flexible enough to be applied to all kinds of communications. So you can reuse and adapt this framework to sort of match the way that you tend to work within your organization. The framework combines two different concepts. One is the supporter lifecycle approach, and the other one is organizational shop window planning. I'll explain them one by one, but they're really powerful when they're being combined into a single framework, and you can use them together. The first one is, as mentioned, life cycle-based communication. So this is an approach where you consider your entire communications work from your audience's perspective. Now, many of you will have heard of life cycle-based planning and things like that, but we have definitely used this in a way that and then tailored it to match the situation that most nonprofit organizations find themselves in. if you think about the experience from your audience perspective and you start mapping it out, it often starts with attention, because seeing your message is a prerequisite to a person actually doing something with you. So in the digital world, that's typically traffic, or someone sees something on social media and clicks on a link, or they put a search term in a search engine, and that's how they find you. The next stage is activation in this framework. This is where people take action for the first time. It's the first time they're actually doing something with you. The important thing here is that that is also the point where they would leave an opt-in to receive further email communications from you, which is important so you can actually build the relationship long-term. The next step in this framework is engagement, which is obviously not always needed to get people to commit long-term, but in most cases, and especially from the data that we're seeing, people don't just sign up to like make a regular gift with an organization the first time they see something about the organization. It typically requires engagement and like building this long-term relationship. Most people don't move in after a first date. So long-term is a higher bar ask that shows a deeper commitment to the organization. Examples for that might be signing up to become a regular donor or a member if you're a membership-based organization, or it could also be volunteering. So basically anything that's a long-term and higher bar ask, and that also requires more commitment from supporters. And of course, that's just an example. But to sum it up, attention is how you get the message in front of your audience. Activation is where people act, and that's also where they provide an opt-in to receive further communications from you. Typically, that happens by email. Engagement is where you build the relationship long-term towards more activity and sort of like a deeper understanding of your organization, and also taking more actions. And long-term is a higher bar ask that shows you deeper commitment and also potentially financial contributions or donating time. The life cycle stages, as I've just described them here, they might be a little different for your organization. So you can adjust the framework to fit and model how your life cycle looks like. But we found that these 4 steps often work quite well for a wide range of organizations. Also, by keeping the steps to 4 or 5, it keeps it somewhat manageable. But we have seen organizations map out life cycles in much more detail. So that's definitely also an option. So the next step is to actually put these stages of the life cycle onto your canvas. And this is what we call the grid, where you can actually start mapping it out and start placing certain aspects of your planning and sort of put it within the corresponding column. So as you can see, it's got attention, activation, engagement, and long-term for the purpose of this example. Once you have this grid established, you can use it in a number of different ways. We're only going to cover a few of them in this presentation, but one of the great sort of activities to start with is to simply map all the things that you are currently doing. So in orange, you can see the social media communications that's then leading to an online petition. Social media communications is how you get attention. The petition is activation. The post-it notes in blue in this example show online fundraising leading, and again, it uses online advertising to then lead supporters to also make a donation. In this case, the donation ask is actually being used as a form of activation. Depending on the organization that you work for and how you relate to donors, and this might also be an option. So just because it's a donation doesn't mean it has to be a higher bar ask. It could also be an activation or play the role of activation, really. But that depends on the kind of organization that you are. This works particularly well if you do some kind of emergency response fundraising or something similar, where there's a lot of attention on the problem, and you can actually ask supporters to give right away. Now, if you go one step further, what you can do is that you can also map the different activities of departments. So I've just shown you examples that are very basic. If you take it a step further, you can see, in this case, the campaigns team in orange has 2 large activities planned. One is supporter recruitment. So this is getting people from attention and activating them. That's the first bit that you see. and then an onward supporter journey. So a tailored sequence of emails with the purpose of welcoming newly recruited supporters and engaging them to also build the relationship long-term. The fundraising department in this scenario has plans to recruit new cash givers, so from attention to activation. Then there's a gap because there's not really anything in engagement, but the team does have plans to upgrade the donors. So they do have like long-term plans to get people to make a regular gift. Now, if you look at these two plans from two different departments, you might actually come to the conclusion that it could be beneficial for both if they collaborate instead of like splitting it up into two different sections of communications. And because the fundraising team doesn't really have much to offer in the engagement section in this in the engagement stage of the life cycle in this example, they might actually invest their money and support the recruitment efforts of the campaigns team, and then integrate specific fundraising asks within the supporter journey, so within the sequence of emails, and then they may even have better results in the long term. So they might get more regular donors to really sign up as a result of this engagement step, and really making sure that it's integrated with other kinds of communications. Obviously, that's just an example, but it shows you how you can use this framework to think about what it is that you're currently planning, what you're currently doing, and how you might be able to improve it and sort of also collaborate between different departments. We've used this exact approach with many organizations when designing supporter journeys across departments. So this diagram is just a small snippet of a journey that we've helped organizations build. The reason why I'm showing you this is because the output is often like a very elaborately planned experience for supporters. But at the center of it all is really the understanding of like, how can we get different departments to collaborate? How can we bring the supporters' perspective and the objectives of the different departments together? Once you've actually worked out your life cycle and the stages within that life cycle, you can use this framework in a lot of different ways. You can map out your projects, you can plan audience-focused communications, so you can slice it up into different segments. You can integrate plans from different departments, you can measure long-term performance, and you can identify opportunities to improve your plans. So here are a few more examples of what you can do. A great place to start with the framework is to map how supporters are interacting with you right now. So what is it that you're currently doing? This is also an exercise where we have a little workbook for you that we're going to share afterwards, but I'm going to talk you through the exercise really quickly. So by starting to collect all these things that you're already doing, for many organizations, the outcome will actually look like this. So there's going to be a lot in attention, and you're going to have a few things in the long-term column, such as volunteering or signing up for regular gifts. And all the things in the long-term column, these are often like high priority and like very important objectives. So this is typically what your organization might even have in the annual plan, and like say like this is what we're really going to be focusing on this year. But what's often lacking is the activation stage of the life cycle, and especially the engagement stage. So in this example, what you see is just a few examples in attention. Really, you have traffic from search engines, social media posts, or like emails that end up in the email inbox. Now, some organizations have a little more, like for example, they offer online actions such as a petition, but the gap, especially in the engagement stage of the life cycle, is still very visible. So if you do this exercise, it's really easy to then see, okay, where do we actually do a lot? And does that align with the kind of priorities that we have when it comes to objectives? In most organizations, it's going to look similar like to this one, but maybe yours looks very different. In either way, it can help you sort of like visualize what it is that you're doing at the moment. And it can also help you to work out how you might be able to actually fill the gap. And yes, that looks like you might just have to do more, or like on top of the kind of activities that you already have planned, even more. But sometimes that also means just changing the priorities. So you might not do a few things in one area, but instead shift your attention to another area. So all the post-it notes in red that you can see here, those are the ones that you could be adding to then really fill the gap in terms of engagement. Maybe you have a follow-up email to target actions or other kind of advocacy actions, or you might find other ways to engage your audience further. This is roughly the situation that Versus Arthritis were actually in. So their brand and marketing campaign, their brand and marketing lead generation campaigns were actually really successful. So they spent quite a significant budget on and successfully recruited a lot of supporters. But what they were struggling with was to actually get these supporters to also commit long-term to support to some kind of financial contribution. So in the language of the framework, they were investing heavily in the first stages and so attention and activation, and they were also really good at that. But what they're lacking was engagement and towards the long-term offers. So we've worked with them to help establish different ways of working and to really integrate the different departments and also communications from an audience perspective. And what they learned from that, they ended up implementing. And when they did launch their regular giving product, that was at some point in July this year, they actually ended up recruiting 300 new regular donors within the first couple of weeks. Now, obviously, this is just an example from an organization that had already invested a lot in recruitment. But ideally, what you do is that you always bring these two things together from the get-go. So do both. Invest in recruitment, but also think about the long term. Now, actually, in this case, Jack and Bethan from Versus Arthritis did a really great presentation on this exact project. So I encourage you to watch the recording of that. It's a really great story and also a good example of how this kind of supporter focused work can really lead to tangible results. I think we're going to share the link in the chat, so watch out for that. Another way the framework can help you is to find out more meaningful measures of success. Now, we all know these KPIs where we feel like, hold on, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Why is this in there? So if you think about it and you simply place the numbers and the objectives for each of the stages on the grid, what you're going to see is attention in terms of digital. That is typically traffic. So it's unique visitors that hit your landing page, your website, or wherever it is that you want supporters to go, or potential supporters at this stage. Activation, that is where you're asking people to actually do something. And as part of that, also leave an opt-in. So this could be a newsletter sign up. It could be a free giveaway of something. It could be a petition, an action. In some cases, it could also be a one-off donation. So what you're counting here is the number of people who've also opted in to receive further communications. The reason is that you want to build this relationship with these supporters. And for that, you're going to need the opt-ins. The next step, engagement. Now, the exact formula on how you calculate engagement might change from one organization to another, but you could say has taken at least 2 actions in the past 3 months and has engaged with at least 3 more emails in one way or another. So they have been active and they're somewhat engaged. Sometimes you can also say, like everyone who's participated in this particular engagement action, and that was the 2nd time they're being asked to do something. So in either way, you end up with a total number of people who are on your email list and who are engaged. And the last one is probably the easiest, because all the fundraisers are going to tell you simply count the number of new regular donations, the number of new regular donors you're getting. The same thing is probably true for volunteering in other areas. So it's a clear number. What you can do with this framework is that because it's based on the life cycle, you can see how high is the conversion rate, and that those are the post-it notes in red on this slide, from one stage to another. The reason why this is great is because it gives you a quick overview of where you're at, and you can use this to drill down. So if you think about one particular thing that you're analyzing, one particular action, it could look like this. At the top, you see all channels for recruitment. So this is all of the people that you've somehow interacted with. Sorry, this is a bit overwhelming initially, but I'm going to explain it. So if you break that further down, again, it's the same structure. So in attention, you have traffic. In activation, you have the number of email opt-ins you're collecting. In engagement, you have how many people have actually engaged with you over a longer period of time. And in long term, you have the number of people who've, for example, signed up to be regular donors. The blue post-it notes here, the first row is everything for one particular, for this particular campaign. And then it's broken down into a few channels for recruitment. So if those channels in this case are social, so in this case, that's just your social media activity where you might post on various different platforms to attract new supporters. Sharing, this is where your existing supporters share your actions and share what it is that you're doing. And that way you're getting traffic. And social ads, those are ads that you run. So you spend money on social media to actually get traffic in return. Now, if you look at these three as an example, what you're going to see is, if you look at the first column, it looks like sharing especially is not doing particularly much, right? It's about 7,000 people out of the total, which is 102,000 people. So these are that is traffic on the page. So it's actually it's a very low number. But if you look at that through the entire stages of the life cycle, and you go all the way to the end, you can see that the outcome is actually 399, so almost 400 new regular givers from this channel alone, which is actually more than half of the entire number of regular givers. So what you can see in this example is really, by breaking it down through the different stages of the life cycle, you're not just talking about how much traffic you're getting through one particular channel. You're not just talking about how many email opt-ins do I get. You're actually thinking about it from like really, you're thinking about the long-term objectives. And this is why it's so useful. So obviously you could do that in many different ways, but we don't have that much time. So I'm going to move on now. There are many different ways of this particular framework and how you can use this for mapping, for data analysis, for audience-driven communications, and for all sorts of different ways. I will now briefly go into the second element of the framework, because together is where they really shine, and that is shop window planning. So imagine your organization's communication with the outside world as like a massive shop window. If you try and cram 27 totally different messages into your little window, or you maybe change it every single day, it's going to be difficult to bring your message across. Also, it will look a little messy from the outside. So many of you will probably now think about the 10 different messages that your organization is sending at one particular day, or at any time, really. And shop window planning is a metaphor that we can use to get a common understanding that the organization's outside display has to be coordinated to really get the message across and to have an impact. This is a pretty flexible framework. Maybe your organization also has a little small shop window. It's not just this one big one. Like in this example, it could be the glass door on the image that is actually a smaller shop window. So maybe you as an organization will always communicate multiple messages at any given time. But the point that I'm making is that one has to be the top priority, and this is where most of your resources go. This is where most of the attention goes. You can define these shop windows to match your ways of working and your objectives. So in this example, it's a big shop window. It's defined to be active for 3 months. So that is the public facing side of this shop window or campaign. Within that period of time, the email list will be blocked. So people on the email list will only receive messages about this particular campaign for at least 2 months, so the majority of this time. And your team has the capacity to deliver about 2 of these a year, and it also takes them about 3 months to prepare them. Now, this is just an example. Obviously, this has to be worked out for your organization, the capacity and the teams that you have. But what you can see here is that this allows you to clearly communicate. This is what we can do and what we're expecting to do and how we think it's going to work. Now, this is where it gets exciting, because this is where we bring these two elements together. The idea is that every time you plan a shop window that is big, so it's the top priority of what it is that you're communicating, you have to make sure that you include activities from every stages of the life cycle. So in practice, what this might look like is that the exact definition of a big shop window for this organization is there has to be at least one entry-level action for new people to join. There has to be at least one higher bar action or an engagement action that follows. And there has to be at least one fundraising ask dedicated to this particular campaign. On top of that, you definitely want to have email communications for 5 to 10 weeks. So a kind of support a journey about this. And for this period, there shall not be any other emails that are sent to this exact audience. On top of that, then there also needs to be social media content for 5 to 10 weeks to keep momentum up. But again, this very much depends on your organization. It's just an example. So you're defining what does it mean if you do like a big campaign, big shop window, top priority for this organization. What does that mean? And what's the minimum requirement? So according to this definition, a large shop window, again, we're back to the grid. You can, it would look like this. So the minimum is there's something in attention, so social content over a longer period of time. Ideally, you would also spend some budget on advertising and other things, but this, let's say this is the minimum. Then you have dedicated email communications spanning all the way from activation, so the point where people will provide an email opt-in, to long-term, where they will sign up for a regular gift or do something else that sort of is equivalent to like a long-term commitment. Every level, like an entry-level action, like a petition for recruitment, higher bar action in engagement, like an email to target action or some kind of engagement action, could also be a fundraising ask. Now, small shop windows, in contrast, could be made up of a few social media posts. Maybe you have, you put some content on the website, you issue a press release, or there's one very targeted email that goes out to a smaller group of people on your email list. Again, you will often need to react to certain things quickly. So having these small shop windows can be useful to make sure that you don't have to plan everything 3 months in advance. But at the same time, this will always be limited. So a minimum, if you put that on the model, what you can see is all of this is going to be in the attention stage. Now, in this case, it's not a problem because it's fine for certain things to only get fewer resources and to only cover one step of the life cycle. Where it's important is that for those top priority campaigns that you're planning, for those like big moments, that's where you need to make sure that you cover all the stages in the life cycle. Also, a small shop window like this might actually turn into a bigger one. So if there's something that you're responding to quickly, because it's actually very newsworthy at this point in time, you can then still expand it and turn it into a bigger shop window later. Another view of the shop window planning model is a calendar. So this allows you to place the shop windows on the calendar. And in a typical scenario, you would have the preparation time in there. So that's what you can see in sort of in the dashed lines. And you will instantly see where activities overlap. For a small shop window, like in this example, there's the Christmas campaign and there's the volunteer conference. These small shop windows, they can overlap with bigger ones. But what's important is that the preparation time, you actually have the capacity to deliver it, and that the big shop windows never overlap. So that's really important because you want to make it, because as mentioned in this example, you're going to have the entire email list only send emails to the entire email list for 2 months that are directly connected to this one shop window. So there's not really any room for other issues. What you can also do is, as you can see, there's a line on this chart and it says draft underneath. So if new things come up, you can actually place them on the calendar in this model, and you can sort of move them around and see where they fit. And that is a great way to visually plan capacity, but also make all the plans that the different departments and different teams already have, make them more transparent and make sure that everyone's aware of what's going on. There are many different ways to use shop windows, but obviously this presentation is just an introduction and we don't have that much time. And we also want to leave lots of time for questions. The short version is you can use this framework to visualize what's going on and what's planned. You can also use it to change your plans and to simply map out what the status quo is. You can standardize certain aspects of your activities, like what does it mean if you put on one big campaign? What's the minimum requirement for that? And you can use this as a top-level planning tool and a way to create transparency between teams and departments. And through all of that, that can help you reduce friction, and it can put your audience needs first. And both of these are really important when we think about engagement and creating successful communications. Through shop windows, you can also limit the number of concurrent messages your organization is sending, and that automatically leads to good prioritization. And prioritization is really key to cutting through with your message. But it also makes schedules and dependency planning much more transparent. So the next time some senior manager is asking you for like a quick turnaround of one particular piece of work, is actually very transparent to see what kind of ripple effects this is going to have. And that empowers everyone within the organization to really show what's going to happen and what the reality of capacity planning is. So ask yourself, what types of shop windows should your organization have? What should they look like? How are these connected to the stages of the life cycle? And also, what are you currently doing and how does that compare? So a little teaser, we're actually writing a book about this that's coming. So while we're still working on that, and it'll be a couple more months, you can actually download a workbook that describes one of the exercises that I've also mentioned today. So this is really great, and it's a good sort of first step if you want to get started on this framework. So to download it, we're sharing a link in the chat, but you can also just click on the QR code if you want that. There's also the link spelled out above it. So thank you. I hope that was useful. And if you'd like to reach out, you know where to find me. And I believe we do have some time for questions. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you.
Hello. Thank you so much for a really, really interesting presentation about the framework. Fascinating and really practical as well. And thank you also for all the practical tools that you're sharing as well. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions. We've run well over, so we're going to need to move on, but hopefully you can check the questions that are popped up in the chat and maybe you have some time to give some answers there. I want to also say that More Onion are providing an advice session for you. So with More Onion's powerful supporter-centered planning framework, you can quickly get an overview of your digital mobilization work and see where investing more resources would have an impact. For example, are you recruiting lots of supporters but then failing to deepen that relationship, or losing more supporters than you recruit? So book your appointment with one of their strategists, and you can work through a short exercise based on the planning framework. So contact hello@moreonion.com, and I think all the details will be in your delegate bag and probably are in the chat as well. So a massive thank you to you, Florian.